Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar Visual Meets Motion Exploring the Future of UX Design. I'm so glad you could join us for what I think will be a fascinating conversation. My name is Neha, and I'm an AVP of Enterprise Accounts at Bayone, and I'll be moderating our discussion today. At Bayone, we've always believed that great design isn't just about how something looks, it's about how it responds and how it comes to life in a user's hands. For years, we've partnered with organizations to create digital experiences that tell stories through every interaction, blending creativity and technology to make design truly human centered. So, why are we hosting this webinar? We are hosting this conversation because something fundamental is shifting in how we design digital experiences. The boundary between visual and motion design, once clear and defined, is blurring in ways that are transforming the industry. Motion isn't just polish anymore. It's core to communication, usability, and brand storytelling. This won't be a technical demo. We'll have a candid exploration of how motion and visual design work together to make digital experiences more expressive and intuitive. Whether you're a designer or simply curious about where design is headed, we hope you'll leave today inspired by new ideas and perspectives to bring into your own work. And now, without much further ado, I would love to introduce our guests. And I'd love to start with Shawn. Shawn, first of all, thank you so much for being here. Shawn is the principal user experience product designer based in Austin, Texas, with over 14 years of experience shaping digital products that combine creativity, usability, and emotion. He's led design for some of the world's most recognized technology companies, building experiences across mobile, web, and emerging platforms. Earlier in his career, he worked in the agency world, designing for global consumer brands before moving into large scale product design. Sean specializes in user experience and interface design, motion and interaction design, and design systems. He holds a bachelor's of design from York University, and he's passionate about using motion and interaction to tell stories that make digital experiences feel alive and emotionally resonant. Now, while Sean brings a deep perspective on user experience and interaction, our next guest brings that experience into motion. Please welcome Ian Bolden. Ian, welcome and thank you so much for being here. Ian is a senior motion designer based in Oakland, California, with over a decade of experience crafting storytelling driven motion systems for leading technology and entertainment brands. He specializes in designing motion that enhances user experience and brand identity, bringing digital interfaces to life through thoughtful movement, rhythm, and emotion. Ian's expertise spans 2D and 3D animation, UX motion design, and scalable design systems. He's fluent in tools like After Effects, Cinema 4D, and Drive, and he has built frameworks that help design and engineering teams collaborate more efficiently. Before his design career, Ian served in the US Navy. In addition to his industry work today, Ian has mentored designers through the School of Motion. His work reflects a passion for motion as storytelling, transforming design from something static into something that truly moves people. Welcome once again to both Sean and Ian. And now let's just dive right in. So, today isn't just about what looks good, it's about what feels good. And that's where motion steps in. The lines between visual and motion design have blurred, thanks to new tools, technology, and of course, a growing focus on user experience. Motion gives visual a voice. It helps us tell stories, guide attention, and create moments that really connect. So let's dive into how this partnership between still and moving design is reshaping creativity and how our guests are seeing it play into their own work. So, as digital experiences evolve, the line between static and what's in motion is getting harder to define. Designers today aren't just creating visuals, they are reshaping how those visuals move, respond, and feel. So, let's start by exploring this shift. Where do you see the boundary between static visual design and motion design today? Has that line blurred in recent years? Ian, I'd love to know your thoughts on this.
Sure. I think that probably like 5, 10 years ago, the line was really easy to see. It's like, does it move? Then it's my job. If it doesn't move, Sean, you got it. But over the years, I think we've gotten a lot of things like Figma having interactivity, creating tool sets that let visual designers do a lot more motion on their end. So I think the line shifted a little bit. But now on the flip side, we have so many more things on the other side that we're working on. There's a lot of tools that have changed it for us to make design easier.
Shawn.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, with some of the new tooling out there, as Ian mentioned, I think Protopie, Figma, Principle, Lottie, to name a few, and of course the process of vibe coding. Both motion and visual, in my opinion, are definitely becoming increasingly blurred. When you think of Lottie in particular, it has made it so that designers can design and animate with overall less restrictions and to output a JSON file that essentially contains the animation all through code already. And this means that engineers don't have to painstakingly rebuild each frame of the animation that you just created. Instead, they can just use the JSON file, which definitely speeds things up. And I would say there's still a boundary overall, though. However, in terms of skill level and talent, the typical product designer, and that's subjective, of course, is going to be more focused on solving a user problem as well as visual design. Mm-hmm. And typically, this means they're not going to specialize in motion graphics as much and visual storytelling. And the motion team where we work, and that's Ian and his team, they're incredibly talented. And when we have share outs, usually, in all honesty, most people get excited by their work the most because they really bring the screens to life. When you think of, if you've been in design presentations before, you'll see, in Figma or in a Google Slides deck, you'll see a bunch of stills with a bunch of arrows pointing to different things, or maybe even some GIFs. But when you see the whole thing animated, it really brings everything to life. And there's definitely an appreciation for that.
I love that. It's exciting to see how far we've come from designing still visuals to crafting living, responsive experiences. As tools and collaboration between designers and engineers continue to evolve, the distinction between motion and visual design keeps fading, pushing creativity and interactivity even further. Now, once the foundation of a product experience is in place, from user research to early wireframes, motion often becomes the key to bringing these ideas to life. It's what turns static interaction into something users can feel. So when you're building flows and wireframes, at what point do you think motion becomes essential to communicating the experience? Shawn?
Yeah, I think, every design company has a somewhat fairly similar design process. That typically is going to be a few things. It's starting off usually with a design brief that talks about things like KPIs, what goals we're trying to achieve from a business perspective, what our user goals are, and so on. Then there's user research, there's ideation, and then after that usually is user flows and wireframes. I think at that point, the product team as a whole will have a better understanding of our end users. And typically at that point, we'll be executing on crafting the experience. And that's where motion will be an integral part of the solution. And this is my opinion. Ian may have a different one, but that may add to the communication. Usually when you add motion, it furthers communication. It provides feedback and it adds delight and enrichment overall.
Yeah, I think maybe at the sake of risking my own job security is being careful not to just add motion to add motion. We don't want to go back to the days of, I think I'm dating myself, of like AOL and pop-up ads and very shiny moving, like websites that everyone was using back in the day, and just really putting an intent and purpose behind it all.
Wonderful. It's fascinating how motion can elevate design from functional to emotional, clarifying intent, guiding the user, and adding a sense of delight. As we heard, it's not just decoration. It's part of how we communicate behavior and meaning. Motion becomes essential not at the end, but as a natural extension of the design thinking process. Now, motion isn't just about movement, it's about meaning. Sometimes the right animation can completely change the story in how a user feels when they interact with the product. Can you share a project, obviously without naming the clients, where adding motion truly transformed the impact of the design? Ian?
I think you're seeing it a lot with things like just educational moments in phones. We have all these really complex things that we're doing now of like these little supercomputers that can do a million things, and just teaching the user how to use it. I think apps maybe a few years ago were just using YouTube videos that you'd have to watch like 30 seconds to a minute of watching someone else use it. And now you can just dive in. Like, even how do you explain that if someone runs away with your phone and it's going to lock and keep all your data safe without sounding sketchy and just text. Like now you can just show a little video of a guy that looks like the Hamburglar grabbing a phone and running away and it locks. So I think education is just the biggest thing that Motion's brought recently.
And I think from my point of view, one project that comes to mind is this notion of creating expressive captions. And this has been publicly released, at least the majority of it. So, and basically what captions were before this project was, I'm sure most of you are familiar, when you're watching, you have captions turned on, you're watching a movie, it just captures the basic dialogue without much emphasis on emotion. And for many of us, that's fine. But if you can imagine, this experience is very limiting for users who are hard of hearing and or deaf, as they would not be able to have the same experience as us because they don't get to see the same volumes and emotion. So this new project took the idea of standard captions and added a range of emotions, tones, feelings, intensity, and overall expressiveness of the human voice. And we've done this through adding animations and typography. I think a good example, if you think of when you're watching soccer or football, wherever part of the world you're from, when a goal is scored, there's the long, goal. Now, how that would happen today in today's caption is you would just see goal with probably an exclamation mark and that's it. And it doesn't capture that type of emotion. So what we've done is we're able to detect now the length of that and close to try and keep the same duration as that, all capital letters, for example. So you get the emotion of that goal. We have a bunch of other examples as well that are coming out that we can't yet speak of, but they involve a lot more animation, some of those as well.
I love that. It really shows how motion can take something from nice to wow. When it's done with purpose, it's not just decoration, it's storytelling in motion. It brings energy, emotion, and that little spark that makes people feel something. Motion can be super powerful, but sometimes it can also steal the spotlight in the wrong way. Have you ever seen motion actually hurt a design instead of helping it? And if yes, what made it miss the mark? Shawn?
Yeah, I guess in general, if animations are added without much logic or consistency, can lead to less impactful design or less consistent. Designing is really about problem solving, and therefore, in my opinion, an execution should be done with purpose. And there are times when micro interactions or motion in general is added sort of like a just because, or there's like this bounce effect that you add to like every interaction and just becomes over inundated. In another point of view, in a more literal sense, is in the realm of accessibility for users with vision or light sensitivities. Motion can actually be quite unpleasant and pose serious health risks, sometimes triggering events like dizziness and seizures. And a way of handling this is motion should generally be under 5 seconds, and if you do go over it, you have to add in controls and stuff like that. But in this very very literal perspective, the motion can be distracting, and so for some users, they will actually turn off animations, which is a feature on Android devices. And this means that we need a way, the video itself will need to have a thumbnail that best represents the meaning of that video. So this is like a very, very literal, answer to can it be distracting? For some people, definitely.
As a motion designer, no, it's always great. We always need motion. But I think just echoing off what you said, just really having a purpose to it. I worked on an email campaign that we had some really cool animations that we were doing, and then they really limited the bandwidth that we could use because some countries it was just too heavy for a GIF to be in this. And the click-through rate really went down because of that, because we're now going from like 10 megabyte things to 500 kilobytes. So it really just is there, just moving just to move. And I think having a purpose really sells it. But on the flip side, the people in that other worlds probably really appreciated their data back from a random email campaign.
Absolutely. I think it's all about intention. When motion is purposeful and supports the overall design, it elevates the experience. But when it's overused or inconsistent, it can easily take away the clarity and accessibility. Finding the balance is the key to creating designs that both engage and inform. Now, when it comes to teamwork, we all know design is rarely a solo act, especially when static and motion design have to blend seamlessly. How do you both collaborate across those worlds without, stepping on each other's creative toes? Ian?
I think COVID has gotten us a lot better at it with really just over communicating. And it's the key. I feel like the cheating answer for this, but just you really got to communicate if there's something that I need help with. Like I've got a hand that's got to flip. I can't draw hands. I'm terrible. That's why I do motion. So I got to go to the other side and just really ask for it. Yeah, I think just keeping it open. What about you, Shawn?
I think for me, so I have sort of two answers, but like for me, I do have some experience in motion work. So typically I'm happy to do some of it if it's within my sort of skill set.
How dare you?
Yeah. Past a certain point though, I don't have the skills of someone like Ian. So the best way to collaborate has always been, and his team has a whole like submission form. So this is part of that process, but I heard I'm one of the first to use it, but there's basic clear communication, storyboarding, clear user flows, making sure to talk through each interaction, at a high level reviewing what are the goals and opportunities and problems we're trying to solve for, and really just being as detailed as possible. It just is going to help the motion designer to sort of take on and expand on what we're trying to do.
Wonderful. Now, let's talk about tools because let's face it, they've completely changed the game. With platforms like Lottie and Drive now in the mix, motion design feels more connected to engineering and products than even before. How have these tools shifted the way you collaborate with engineers or PMs? Ian, your thoughts?
Yeah, they've really changed it. I think when you look at After Effects, it's a 30-year-old software. It does so many things. It does visual effects. It does like editing. Well, I do editing in it. I know you're not supposed to. And it's just a small piece of Adobe's income. And I think that you could see how little people care about it compared to something like Photoshop by just looking at the Wikipedia page of Photoshop talks through every journey and evolution of each build. And After Effects is like, it was built in 1995. These dudes did it and Adobe bought it. The end. So because it does so much and gets so little of the pie, it's really hard for them to update. So you have something like Rive that comes along and just lets us really like dive in on the web. You don't have up-to-date MacBook that's still struggling with 2D work. It lets you talk with the engineers a lot easier and get the handshake over a lot easier. And the file sizes are so small. I was just complaining about GIFs being 10 megabytes. A RAW file is like 10 kilobytes. So I think that this is a really exciting time with all these new things coming in. And then just Lottie, great tool to use over, but then sometimes there's just issues sending things over to engineers. So it's fun to play with all these. It's exciting time.
For me, I can only speak to Lottie since I haven't used Rive yet. Lottie's had a huge impact on, for me, my flow of work from an efficiency and quality perspective. I think for those who don't know, I don't know if we explained it already, but Lottie essentially is a process that allows animations to be exported into a JSON file. That means a designer can create, animate, think of all the motion tweaks you're trying to do, all the timing, and get it sort of perfect as best as you can, and export that using Lottie, and then the entire animation is then already coded. This means for engineering, they no longer need to painstakingly build out each frame and sort of, this is how it was, to rebuild everything that you essentially just did in code. Instead, they can use this file already. And this will allow them to focus on solving bigger problems. And for us, that means designers can own, to some degree, the animations and have them engineering ready.
Wonderful. It's so cool to hear how these tools are bridging the gap, taking away some of that back and forth guesswork and letting designers test, tweak, and hand off with more confidence. It really shows how motion is no longer just the final polish, but an integrated part of the product process. All right, so let's move into the handoff. That magical and sometimes messy between design and development. When you're working on motion-rich designs, what tends to cause the most friction during handoff, and how do you smooth those hiccups? Ian?
It's probably the language barrier between motion and engineering, where both of us are in awe of what the other one does, and neither of us know what they do because it's all magic. So smoothing it off is just really over communicating it. I've had files that I've handed off and gotten back, and they say it's broken. Well, what's broken? Everything's moving correctly. I don't know what's broken, and it could be the color switching from like light mode to dark mode that I can't test on my end. So we really just have to over communicate what's going on, what we see, and what we're looking for.
I think for me, for in terms of Lottie handoff, that's what I have more experience with. I've not really had a lot of issues personally. I don't do the amount of motion work as Ian, so for me, it's been more limiting in that sense. However, I would consider prototyping, which I do a lot of, within the realm of motion work. And the constant issue is usually accuracy. Think of timing, Things like typography, colors, alignments, and attention to detail are often slightly off, but these are usually issues that can be solved through clear communication and user testing. And from an empathy point of view, like engineers are usually responsible for building the actual end product. So while they're busy doing scaffolding and back end work, sometimes the front end work isn't as prioritized, and that's something that can easily be solved, like I mentioned, through clear communication and just constant testing.
Love that. It really comes down to translation, right? Bridging the gap between creative intent and technical implementation. When both sides speak a bit of their each other's language, and those hiccups turn into opportunities to make the final experience even better. Now, let's talk about the cutting edge concepts like vibe coding and state machines that are giving designers new superpowers. Do you see designers being able to do more on their own without needing engineering involvement for every step? Ian?
Yeah, vibe coding is definitely the worst name for anything that's very useful. I hate every time I have to say it, but even just my day-to-day work outside of not needing engineers is just like we're having problems with dynamic colors and using Google Gemini or ChatGPT to build a little plugin that just helps me with all these things. Or getting something goofy like I want to rename my layers. So I make a wrestling themed renaming layer thing that talks about elbow drops, and that just only I will use, but I'd have to probably go buy a plugin that will kind of do my niche, but not really work. And then vibe coding, I know people on our team are actually building on full-on mini apps instead of animating and sending prototypes to engineers that this might look this way and this is probably how it should be. They can actually plug in our springs and plug in a bunch of like the animation concepts and tell it to do this and send it to the engineers, like make it work like this, please, but like prettier.
Yeah, I believe as AI models get better over time, we're going to see the role of designers drastically change to, as Ian mentioned, to prompting designs and wireframes, to vibe coding to create prototypes, developing actual production level code to some degree. I think probably mostly front end. And in turn, I believe this would allow engineers to focus on things like, or to focus less on things like bug fixes, front end work, triaging, for example, and instead allow them to focus on solving and building the next generation of experiences, tools, and software.
Wonderful. It's exciting to imagine as these tools and AI capabilities improve, designers could handle more of the prototyping and even production level work, freeing engineers to focus on innovation and next generation features. Essentially, it's about creating a smoother, faster, and more collaborative design to code workflow. Now, with AI and new creative tools emerging, the landscape of design is shifting fast. Do you see the role of visual designers and motion designers starting to blend together, or do you think they'll continue to become more specialized and distinct?
I
Shawn?
think definitely blending together. As Ian and I both mentioned with AI prompting, one of the things it does, it sort of helps to level the playing field in terms of technical knowledge. So with the direction of AI tools as they are now and where they're going, as a designer, I think whether you're doing visual, product, or motion, likely will each one of us should be able to increasingly prompt together prototypes and motion design. I think though, however, I believe technical knowledge is where AI will best serve product teams for the time being. Product design as a whole is about problem solving and about advocating for the end user, through a deep understanding of their needs, their behaviors, and pain points through research and data. I think currently for now, this type of strategic thinking and key decision making is going to be in the hands of product teams as a whole. Although, AI can certainly help with every step of the way. When you consider that AI, and I saw a video of this the other day, and this is actually old news, but AI is solving how protein structures fold through DeepMind. You think it should be able to handle things like this? And I think that's certainly down the pipelines if it's not already here, and I'm just not aware of it yet.
I really think the line in the middle is definitely going to get more blurry because of AI, and it's going to allow us to do a lot more things. But as I said earlier, just allowing us to use a lot more variety of softwares. Like now I don't have to remember every single thing in Cinema 4D or switching to Unreal. I can just go to like ChatGPT and be like, how did I do this in this program again? So it's going to allow us to really like become more generalists. The generalists are becoming more general. We're going to have a lot more software under our belts.
Wonderful. Interesting insights. It seems like AI is leveling the technical playing field, allowing designers and motion designers to collaborate more fluidly on prototypes and motion work. But the strategic thinking, problem solving, and deep understanding of user needs remains at the heart of design, showing that while tools evolve, human insight is still irreplaceable. Now, looking ahead, motion design is evolving rapidly. In the next 3 to 5 years, what do you think will be the biggest opportunity or the mindset shift for motion in UI and UX? Ian?
I think that as our computers get better, as the phones get better, there's going to be a lot more room for personalization and personality in the phone to make them yours. I think Google's already done a really good job at that, and Apple's starting to allow users to express it more. But being able to make it yours, so doing that's going to mean a much bigger motion library. And I think as AI is kicking off, everyone's giving their AI personality and different gradient patterns because we can't use anything but gradient apparently. But I think we're just going to get a lot more cool stuff for individuals to make their own.
I sort of answered this in the previous response, but I think as design systems and AI tools continue to evolve, we're going to see prompting and using natural language to build experiences, including motion. I think overall this is exciting, but also daunting, as it means the technical barrier is going to be significantly reduced. It allows what would be complex user flows and animations to be made by essentially anyone who can accurately describe what they want to achieve. As an example, imagine integrating your design systems and all of the components. And for anyone who's not familiar, design systems essentially is taking the building blocks of your site or app. They could take a card or even just like a list cell, for example, where you define all the permutations for it and so on. And that comprises of a component. Integrating that into, let's say, using Gemini, for example, and then asking it to say, hey, can you create a dialogue with a title, H3, a body copy, P4. These are like standards for typography. And then say, I need a drop down that contains, et cetera. I need an illustration that is about with 3 CTAs, call to actions. And then that could essentially create, your dialogue for you without even really using much of Figma. And then obviously you can expand upon that by adding animations to that as well through prompting. And so that's where I see the direction in the next 3 to 5 years.
Exciting points. It sounds like interactivity and personalization are where motion design is headed. The ability to craft experiences that feel responsive, tailored, and alive is going to make interface not just functional, but genuinely engaging for users. Before we close, let's end on a high note. What's one takeaway you'd share with designers who are excited to push the boundaries of motion and visual design in the years ahead? Shawn, I would love for you to share your takeaway first.
Yeah, I think, and this may sound like an obvious one, but you got to stay up to date with the industry, find a mentor as well. Whether you're 20 years in the industry, whether you're 2 years in the industry, mentorship is important throughout. And be ready for change. I think Ian and I mentioned numerous times with AI. It can be your best friend if you prepare. And I think secondly, even though you asked for one piece of advice, when designing, it's not entirely about making something look pretty, but it's about solving problems. And I'm lucky I get to work in accessibility, and the products we're making now enable a better quality of life for folks of the deaf community and hard of hearing, as well as low vision and blind users. And so at the end of the day, build things. Don't just talk about it. Like, get out there, actually build things. Set time aside, even if it's on your own time, to build your own things as well. And put time in, and just as the saying goes, ship things.
Oh, that's me. I think now is really fun because you can really find what excites you and jump in on it. There's more options for everything now. 5 years ago, being a motion designer was, do you use 4D or After Effects? Now it's there's simulations. You can use Houdini or X particles. If you're doing 3D work, are you going to use 4D, Unreal, Blender? Is Blender cool? Are we taking it seriously now? Then there's systems online like WOMP. You can use Rive or Spline. Like, so many things that you can personalize in, and so many opportunities now. So just find something that you like and really dive into it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing those wonderful takeaways. Such a fascinating conversation so far. I'm sure our audience has a few burning questions. So now let's turn it over to you. What would you like to ask our panelists? Please drop in your questions in the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. All right, this first question comes from Janice Kwong. How do you communicate the value of motion to stakeholders who may not be visual thinkers?
That's every stakeholder. No, I think you have to just show them. So there's a lot of times that you just get a piece or get something and someone can't see your direction. You have to do the internal monologue of, is it quicker if I explain this to you or just to do it? And so I think just make a piece, show them, be like, we could do much cooler stuff like this.
I also just think like motion is an extension of communication. So, as I think Ian pointed about educational moments, I think that's a key thing. Imagine saying you have to go to your settings, turn on this and accessibility. It's like having that done in animation just adds to the communication, like having a GIF at the top that just sort of explains it as well as text. That just is a visual aid. And I think that's more helpful in terms of communicating what you're trying to do.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, moving on to the next question. This comes from one of the LinkedIn users. As a designer, how do you figure out when motion adds real value to the user experience? Who usually makes the call on the team?
I think there's usually a testing team that does this. I worked on these email headers that I mentioned briefly before, but it was kind of like a throwaway budget for an email campaign at the end of the year. And they're just like, can you animate this GIF header? We need to use the rest of our motion budget. It's the end of the year. I think it was a New Year's GIF. And the click-through rate just skyrocketed through there. And everyone's like, give us more of this. So it turned into a little quick 2-day process to now getting a month of lead time to do full-on projects with a writer and a illustrator and me.
Yeah, I think where we work, there's generally an expectation that motion is going to add value. It's not really in question of whether we should or shouldn't do it. Generally, if it's going to communicate more effectively, we should do it. I think, as Ian mentioned, they track almost everything. So you're going to be able to track if something was effective or not. If not, of course, we can always pivot when needed or change the design to communicate what else we're trying to do.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing those wonderful insights. Now, moving on to the next question. This comes from Joshua Moore. I love the idea of using motion with intent, ensuring it's non-intrusive and sensitive of wearing abilities. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, Shawn, you could probably speak to this more, but because you're working in accessibility, but just from my end, it's been very funny with the new EU guidelines of now animating with intent, where we used to have cool looping GIFs, and now it's like, oh, they go longer than 5 seconds. We need to stop them. So it really changes on what you can do.
Yeah, I think there are some challenges because, we have certain animations just on like welcoming screens that just play in the background. And now you need to add like a function to pause that if it's going to play. I think some of the general rules are if it's longer than 5 seconds, you have to add controls to it. You have to avoid flashing, and there's several other rules, but I think it does add a layer of challenge, but you want to make sure to be inclusive of everyone, understanding their needs. So I think in designing with intent and also those types of thinking is really important to be able to design something with everyone in mind.
Just make them shiny and move fast.
With controls.
Yes.
All right, great points. Moving on to the next question. This question comes from Deepak Bhanu. How might motion design play a role in emerging interfaces like spatial computing or mixed reality?
I don't work in either of those fields, but if you looked at Meta's job postings, it's going to play a huge role because they are hiring and paying a lot for that. So, mixed reality is probably at a really exciting time right now. I think when the Vision Pro launched, you're just like, that looks cool. It's really expensive. What am I going to do with that? And then Google last I/O announced the glasses. And remember when the first Vision Pro glasses came out, everyone made fun of it. I think someone got beat up in a bar in San Francisco just for wearing them. And now they're just like a lot cool, like yours, Neha. They're a lot cooler looking and a lot like sleeker. So there's going to be a lot of design mixed reality stuff going in with them.
Yeah, I think inherently when you're dealing with spatial computing and mixed reality, having just say static designs, in my opinion, would be hurtful because these experiences are in movements. Like when you're looking at a VR headset, for example, like movement is part of it. And so to design just like in, let's say, Figma be missing a cue, if you will, be missing something, because visual is part of the experience. And so if you don't at least make prototypes that are inherent or show motion, you're sort of missing the mark, in my opinion. So like motion is even more important in that type of computing circumstance.
Wonderful, great points. Now, this is going to be our last question for the day. This question comes from Rahul Sharma. As motion and interaction design becomes more integral to digital experiences, how do you balance delight with usability? In other words, when does motion enhance the user experience and when does it become a distraction?
You want to take this one first, Shawn? I feel like I'm jumping in on every one of them.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's sort of like a hierarchy of things we want to try and accomplish. Obviously, first is user needs, probably communication, and delight is when we want to take something and really make something a positive experience. That just it's maybe beyond the communication part of it, but just enhancing the experience for someone. Whether it's just literally it makes someone sort of laugh or smile, or just enriches, like tapping on a button, maybe a certain animation happens. There's a certain degree where things need to communicate and function for a certain purpose. But if we can add a moment of delight where we can, and it's not like, in the way of something, I think we should definitely add something like that if it adds value to someone's experience.
Yeah, I think I always just being able to understand and take an objective look at it once you're done with it. That's my hardest part is I animate everything to 10 and then look at it and like, this doesn't need it to go this much. It's just a little education moment. So just being able to take a seat back and or sit back and really examine it and being like, cool, is this serving its purpose? It's supposed to teach someone something. But yeah, always try to make it fun. Fun must be always.
Great points. And thank you to all of the viewers for these wonderful questions. Wow, what a fantastic session. Big thanks to Ian and Shawn for sharing their expertise and to everyone who tuned in today. It's clear that when visual and motion come together, that's when the real magic happens. Keep exploring, keep creating, and keep bringing designs to life. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.